Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome everyone to the second lecture of week 3 of the NPTEL course on modernization and creative communication. Today we are going to delve into the theories of altermodernities and the local indigenous pathways to development. Altermodernities represent a conceptual framework that challenges the Eurocentric narratives of modernity and postmodernity by emphasizing cultural hybridity and fluidity of identities. This concept emerged as a response to globalization, homogenizing tendencies, and highlights the importance of localized and indigenous adaptation in shaping modern identities. Nicolas Bourriard, a French art critic and theorist, first articulated the idea of altermodernity. He argued that this paradigm transcends postmodernism by engaging with global cultural exchanges and translation. Unlike postmodernism, which often fixates on deconstruction and identity politics, altermodernity seeks to create new cultural forms through intercultural negotiation and reinterpretation. Bourriard's emphasis on cultural creolization and transnational dialogues forms the theoretical foundation of altermodernities. The relevance of altermodernities in contemporary discourse is its ability to foreground local and indigenous knowledge systems, offering alternative pathways to the dominant narratives of development, modernity, and globalization. Its emphasis on the resilience of local cultures and their capacity to adapt and innovate in response to global challenges. The concept of altermodernities draws from multiple theoretical perspectives. One of these is postmodernism. Postmodernism emerged in the mid-20th century as a critical reaction to modernism and the Enlightenment ideals of reason, progress, and universal truths. It challenges the notion of grand narratives, comprehensive, overarching stories or ideologies that claim to explain historical, social, or cultural phenomena. Philosophers like Jean-François Lyotard argued that these grand narratives, such as Marxism or the Enlightenment itself, often suppress local or marginalized perspectives in favor of a singular dominant worldview. As a result, postmodernism celebrates plurality, relativism, and the deconstruction of authoritative structures. However, this rejection of grand narratives has not been without a critique. One significant consequence of postmodernism emphasis on fragmentation is a perceived lack of cohesion or a unifying vision of society. Critics argue that the deconstruction of universal truths, while liberating in some ways, can lead to disorientation and a weakening of collective agency. This has fueled calls for alternative frameworks that preserve pluralism while offering pathways for collective understanding and global solidarity. Habermas, a German philosopher and a prominent figure in the Frankfurt School, offered a nuanced critique of both modernity and postmodernity. In his seminal work, Modernity, an Incomplete Project, Habermas argued that the ideals of modernity, rationality, freedom, human emancipation, had not been fully realized. Rather than abandoning modernity as postmodernism often advocates, he called for its critical continuation and renewal. For Habermas, the Enlightenment project was not inherently flawed, but had been distorted by instrumental rationality and the commodification of life under capitalism. Habermas proposed communicative action as a way forward, emphasizing dialogue, mutual understanding, and democratic deliberation as tools for achieving modernity's unfulfilled promises. His critique of postmodernism is rooted in the belief that abandoning universal ideals entirely risks undermining the potential for collective progress and justice. Let's talk about creolization and cultural hybridity. Creolization refers to the process by which elements of different cultures come together to create new hybrid cultural forms. It often arises in context of migration, colonialism, or globalization, where diverse cultural groups interact, exchange, and blend their practices, languages, and traditions. For example, creolization is evident in the development of Creole languages, music genres like reggae or jazz, and fusion cuisines. Cultural hybridity builds on the idea, emphasizing the blending and coexistence of cultural elements from different origins to produce innovative and dynamic cultural expressions. Anthropologists like Arjun Appadurai have explored how globalization accelerates cultural flows across boundaries, leading to the creation of hybrid forms. Appadurai, in particular, emphasizes the role of cultural globalization in reshaping identities and practices. He argues that these cultural mixes are not just passive combinations, but active reimaginations of culture in ways that foster creativity and adaptation. Boryard introduces the concept of translation as praxis to highlight the active and transformative nature of intercultural exchanges. In this context, translation goes beyond mere linguistic conversion. It encompasses the reinterpretation and recontextualization of cultural ideas, practices, and traditions in different settings. For example, when a cultural practice from one society is adopted in another, it often undergoes significant adaptation influenced by local norms and values. Translation, according to Boryard, has the potential to foster intercultural dialogue and mutual understanding. It's a creative process where meanings are reshaped, allowing for the renewal of cultural traditions and the generation of innovative ideas. By treating cultural exchange as a form of translation, Boryard emphasizes how global interactions can enrich cultures rather than erode them. The process involves negotiation, reinterpretation, and adaptation, highlighting the fluid and dynamic nature of culture in a globalized world. Both creolization and cultural hybridity align with the idea of translation as praxis, as they involve the blending and reinterpretation of cultural elements. These frameworks reject static notions of culture and instead celebrate its fluid, adaptive, and innovative aspects, particularly in the face of globalization. Together, they encourage us to see cultural exchange as an opportunity for renewal and innovation rather than loss or dilution. Decolonial theory critiques the ongoing impacts of colonialism, particularly its imposition of Eurocentric worldviews that marginalize other knowledge systems. It seeks to dismantle the dominance of Western paradigm and promote epistemic diversity by validating local and indigenous ways of knowing. Walter Mignolo's concept of decoloniality challenges the dominance of Eurocentric modernity, calling for a profound delinking from its epistemological frameworks and ontological assumptions. Modernity, often celebrated for its progressive achievements in science, technology, and governance, is inextricably tied to coloniality, the enduring legacy of exploitation, dominance, and epistemic violence that has structured global power relations since the onset of European colonial expansion. Mignolo argues that modernity's universal claims are a facade that marks the dependence on the suppression of non-Western ways of knowing and being. A delinking, as proposed by Mignolo, involves a critical rejection of the universality of Western epistemologies, which have historically marginalized and delegitimized indigenous, subaltern, and non-Western knowledge systems. This process seeks to recover and recenter knowledge systems rooted in the cultural practices, spiritual traditions, and lived experiences of marginalized communities. It is a call to dismantle the colonial matrix of power which perpetuates economic, cultural, and epistemic hierarchies. Mignolo envisions a pluriversal world, one where epistemic diversity thrives and multiple ways of knowing coexist on equitable terms. This pluriversality resists the homogenizing tendency of global modernity, fostering dialogues that honor specificity and dignity of diverse epistemologies and ontologies. Decoloniality thus becomes a project of liberation and epistemic justice. The concept of altermodernities aligns with decoloniality by valuing non-Western paradigms as equally valid. Unlike Western modernity, altermodernities emerge from indigenous and local realities, offering alternative frameworks for addressing global challenges such as climate change and sustainability. Indigenous knowledge, often deeply connected to ecological stewardship and spirituality, challenges colonial hierarchies by presenting holistic, community centered approaches. Both decoloniality and altermodernities aim to dismantle Western epistemic dominance, fostering more inclusive intellectual landscape. They advocate for recognizing and integrating diverse ways of knowing, promoting a transformative shift towards epistemic equality and justice. The vision seeks not to reject modernity, but to disrupt its Eurocentric monopoly and enable a plurality of worldviews. Bauman's concept of liquid modernity describes a contemporary social condition characterized by relentless change, instability, and the dissolution of long established structures and uncertainties. Unlike the solid modernity of earlier eras, which was defined by enduring institutions, fixed traditions, and stable social frameworks, liquid modernity represents a shift towards a more fluid and dynamic reality. In this liquid state, traditional anchors of stability, such as family, community, and long term employment, have given way to fleeting and malleable arrangements. The constant state of flux is evident in various aspects of life. Relationships are often transient, with bonds becoming less durable and more subject to individual needs and desires. The workplace, too, has become more precarious, with flexible contracts, short term gigs, and emphasis on adaptability, replacing the stability of lifelong careers. Even personal identity has become a fluid construct, with individuals required to reinvent themselves continually to keep pace with the rapidly changing social and economic landscape. In this context, individuals are burdened with the responsibility of navigating their own paths in an unpredictable and ever shifting world. This lack of stability often leads to a pervasive sense of insecurity as people struggle to find lasting meaning, belonging, or certainty in their lives. The erosion of collective structures and shared values further exacerbates their sense of rootlessness, leaving individuals to rely increasingly on their resources to cope with the demands of liquid modernity. Bowman's analysis highlights the paradox of this condition. While it offers unprecedented freedom and opportunities for self expression, it also imposes significant emotional and psychological challenges as individuals grapple with the pressure of constant adaptation and the absence of enduring support systems. Altermodernities provide a way to navigate this instability by grounding identity in intercultural dialogues and pluralistic frameworks. Rather than clinging to rigid structures or universal ideals, altermodernities embrace the diversity and interconnectedness of global cultures. They promote the idea that identity is dynamic and can thrive through interactions across cultural boundaries. By valuing local epistemologies and fostering mutual exchange, altermodernities offer a sense of rootedness and resilience amid the fluid, ever shifting realities of liquid modernity. Indigenous knowledge systems are complex, dynamic frameworks of understanding and interaction with the world that have evolved over generations within specific cultural and ecological contexts. These symptoms provide vital insights into sustainable living and environmental stewardship, and they serve as powerful counterpoints to Western centric scientific and technological paradigms. In the discourse on altermodernities, a concept that seeks to recognize and validate diverse ways of modernity beyond the dominant Western model. Indigenous knowledge offers critical pathways to alternative epistemologies and practices. What are the key characteristics of indigenous knowledge systems? Local context. Indigenous knowledge is deeply embedded in the specific ecological, cultural, and social realities of a community. Unlike universalized Western scientific models, it adapts to local environmental conditions and provides tailored solutions for sustainable living. For instance, intuit knowledge of sea ice conditions reflects generations of observational expertise specific to the Arctic. Another holistic approach, indigenous knowledge system embraces a holistic worldview that integrates physical, spiritual, emotional, and social dimensions of life. This interconnected perspective emphasizes balance and harmony, not just among humans, but also with the natural world. It challenges reductionist methodologies, advocating for a more integrative understanding of complex systems. Oral traditions, the transmission of indigenous knowledge relies on oral tradition, including storytelling, songs, rituals, and hands on practices. These methods ensure the continuity of knowledge while fostering communal participation and intergenerational bonding. The oral nature of IKs also allows for adaptation and resilience over time. Indigenous knowledge is relational, viewing humans as part of a broader network of relationships that include animals, plants, landscapes, and spiritual entities. This perspective underpins practices of reciprocity, respect, and care for all forms of life. Far from being static, indigenous knowledge system evolves in response to changing circumstances, integrating new knowledge while maintaining core principles rooted in tradition and experience. Examples. What are the examples of indigenous knowledge systems? Ayurveda and yoga. These systems reflect holistic health practices that prioritize balance between mind, body, and spirit, as well as between individuals and their environment. Ayurveda's reliance on natural remedies and yoga's meditative practices underscores principles of sustainability and well-being that resonate globally today. Pollination navigational practices. Indigenous Polynesian seafarers developed sophisticated methods of organic navigation using stars, wave patterns, bird flight paths, and cloud formation. These practices not only demonstrate a profound understanding of ecological systems but also highlight a culture of exploration deeply attuned to the natural world. The Andean worldview intertwines agricultural practices with spiritual beliefs, recognizing the interconnectedness of human and culture. Concepts like Panchamama, Mother Earth, exemplify indigenous environmental ethics, where offerings and rituals express gratitude and respect for nature's abundance. Aboriginal Australians have practiced controlled burns for millennia, shaping ecosystems to enhance biodiversity and reduce wildfire risk. The method, often referred to as cultural burning, illustrates ecological expertise grounded in an intimate knowledge of local landscapes. Let's take a look at contribution to global discourses. The first point that we need to discuss is environmental justice. Indigenous knowledge system emphasizes ecological sustainability and equitable resource distribution, aligning with principles of environmental justice. These systems advocate for protecting the rights of marginalized communities and fostering harmonious coexistence with nature. Then the climate resilience, the adaptive strategies inherent in indigenous knowledge offer valuable lessons for building resilience against climate change. Practices such as water harvesting, seed preservation, and agroforestry provide sustainable solutions to modern environmental challenges. By validating indigenous epistemologies, indigenous knowledge systems contributes to the broader project of decolonizing knowledge systems. It challenges the monopoly of Western science and promotes pluralism in understanding and addressing global issues. Okay, now case study India's Bhakti movement. Let's take a look at the India's Bhakti movement. The Bhakti movement was a spiritual and cultural renaissance in medieval India that challenged caste-based orthodoxy, emphasizing devotion and inclusivity. It utilized vernacular languages like Tamil, Hindi, and Bengali, making spiritual teachings accessible to all. By promoting localized practices and rejecting exclusivity, it aligns with Altermodernities, fostering a pluralistic and inclusive cultural framework. The Maori Renaissance in New Zealand is another example. It underscores indigenous sovereignty and identity. Revival efforts include strengthening to the Maori language and traditional arts, bolstered by policies like the Maori Language Act of 1987. This institutionalization represents a model for cultural preservation, ensuring indigenous traditions endure within modern national framework. Mahatma Gandhi's Hind Swaraj critiques Western industrial modernity, advocating indigenous alternatives rooted in nonviolence, self-reliance, and sustainable living. His ideas inspired global decolonization movements, positioning local ethical systems as pathways for modern resilience and sustainability. The Zapatista movement, known as the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, arose in Chiapas, Mexico in the early 1990s. It was launched in response to the marginalization of indigenous communities, particularly in light of neoliberal policies like the North American Free Trade Agreement, which threatened communal land rights. The movement is rooted in indigenous traditions and governance systems, blending these with global discourses on human rights and anti-globalization. By leveraging international solidarity network, the Zapatista drew global attention to their struggle, garnering support from activists, scholars, and organizations worldwide. This fusion of local and global approaches embodies altermodernities, offering an alternative to dominant neoliberal and colonial paradigms. Though autonomous governance, the Zapatistas emphasize self determination, cultural preservation, and political autonomy, showcasing how localized resistance can resonate across transnational landscapes, inspiring broader movements for social and environmental justice. Each case illustrates the power of indigenous and local movements to reframe modernity through inclusivity, sustainability, and resilience. Pathways to alter modernities highlight the vital role of indigenous knowledge systems in addressing global challenges through localized, context specific solutions. These pathways underscore the significance of reclaiming traditional practices while engaging modernity on indigenous terms. Communities worldwide are revitalizing ancestral techniques in agriculture, medicine, and governance, fostering sustainable practices deeply rooted in ecological wisdom. This revival strengthens cultural sovereignty, enabling indigenous movements to assert their heritage against external pressures of assimilation and exploitation. Globally, indigenous approaches challenge dominant capitalist and colonial paradigms, presenting alternative frameworks for development that emphasize ecological balance and cultural diversity. Language and storytelling are pivotal in preserving and transmitting indigenous knowledge, serving as cornerstone of cultural resilience and identity. Indigenous languages, often endangered, encapsulate unique worldviews and ecological insights. Efforts to revive languages like Te Reo Maori exemplify the enduring strength of cultural traditions. Similarly, storytelling maintains oral traditions as living archives, weaving history, ethics, and cosmology into narratives that sustain community values. Aboriginal dreamtime stories, for example, offer profound spiritual and ecological understandings of the land, reinforcing the interconnectedness of people and the environment. Together, these practices support the flourishing of indigenous cultures, ensuring that relevance and contributions to contemporary and future societies. Indigenous pathways rooted in deep cultural tradition and sustainable practices face significant challenges in the contemporary world. Globalization, with its emphasis on global capitalism, disrupts local economies and traditions, often replacing them with homogenized systems that erode cultural diversity. This not only threatens unique practices but also diminishes the worldview embedded in these traditions. The enduring legacies of colonialism further exacerbate these challenges. Historical injustices such as land dispossession and cultural suppression continue to have profound impacts on indigenous communities, limiting their access to ancestral lands and traditional knowledge. Efforts to decolonize knowledge systems and assert indigenous perspectives are often met with resistance from enriched institutional frameworks that prioritize dominant narratives. Modernity, characterized by industrialization and urbanization, imposes additional pressures by displacing traditional livelihoods and disrupting ecosystems integral to indigenous ways of life. Furthermore, indigenous knowledge systems, which have long demonstrated adaptability and ecological wisdom, are frequently sidelined in favor of Western scientific paradigms. This marginalization not only undermines the richness of indigenous epistemologies, but also diminishes their potential contributions to addressing global challenges such as climate change. Collectively, these dynamics threaten the survival and flourishing of indigenous pathways, highlighting the urgent need for inclusive and equitable frameworks that respect and integrate their voices. Empowering indigenous communities involves integrating their knowledge into broader frameworks through various strategies. Community based initiatives revive traditional practices such as seed saving projects that preserve biodiversity and indigenous farming techniques. Policy integration by governments and organizations, guided by frameworks like the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, strengthens advocacy and action. Education plays a key role by incorporating indigenous knowledge into formal curricula, fostering respect and understanding. Bilingual education programs ensure younger generations remain connected to their cultural heritage, promoting intergenerational transmission of wisdom while empowering communities to address contemporary challenges. Adopting alter-modern pathways fosters cultural resilience, ecological wisdom, and social inclusion. Cultural heritage is preserved despite global pressures, empowering marginalized communities through pride in their tradition. Ecological wisdom emerges from sustainable practices rooted in deep ecological knowledge, such as permaculture, inspired by traditional farming methods. Social inclusion is enhanced through the recognition of diverse voices, enriching democratic process. Indigenous leadership in governance further promotes inclusive and equitable decision making. These pathways provide innovative solutions to modern challenges while celebrating diversity, ensuring sustainability, and strengthening the interconnectedness of cultural, environmental, and social systems. The concept of altermodernities seeks to redefine modernity through localized, pluralistic, and intercultural approaches. Yet, it faces several critiques. A significant concern is the commodification of culture, where indigenous practices risk being transformed into marketable products for global consumption. This process often leads to the loss of authenticity as traditions are reshaped to align with the demands of broader, often Western dominated markets. Additionally, altermodernities face scalability issues. While they emphasize localized solutions, these approaches may not translate effectively to a global context. The interplay between preserving tradition and fostering innovation also poses a challenge, as the two can conflict, particularly when external forces demand adaptability. Moving forward, future directions for altermodernities must prioritize equitable cross-cultural dialogues that promote meaningful exchanges without imposing hierarchical knowledge systems. There is also a need to develop integrative frameworks that respect and incorporate indigenous wisdom while safeguarding its integrity against exploitation and dilution. By addressing these critiques, altermodernities could evolve into a more robust paradigm capable of bridging local and global perspectives while fostering inclusivity and sustainability. Altermodernities highlight the importance of alternative knowledge system in addressing the limitation of Western modernity and postmodernity. By centering indigenous pathways, we can envision a more inclusive and sustainable future. Indigenous knowledge systems offer invaluable insights into resilience, sustainability, and social harmony, making them critical to global development. Thank you.